You're listening to Trace Hunt Radio. We explore the darkest chapters of true crime, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and the twisted minds behind them. Follow the blood, chase the clues, uncover the truth. Stay sharp. The hunt begins now.
She begged to see her son one last time, and I gave her a doll.
The doll was found lying face down beside a rusted wire fence on Lily Street, its white plastic dress stained with rain and dirt. It would have been easy to dismiss, just another discarded toy, left to rot like the rest of this forgotten part of suburban London. But something about it unsettled Marjorie Bell, the old woman who walked her dog down this route every evening. She noticed the doll's eye first, a bright, glassy blue that shimmered unnaturally in the low sunlight. When she bent down to take a closer look, the eye twitched, and then blinked. Marjorie staggered back, nearly tripping over her dog's leash. The doll's eye didn't move again, but as she leaned in once more, a fine line of deep red fluid trickled from the corner of its socket. She gasped, stumbled back again, and called the police. What followed would become the most disturbing investigation in local history. Detective Inspector Callum Reeves was not easily rattled. After 20 years in homicide, he'd seen his fair share of depravity murders of passion, contract killings, drug war executions. But even as he stood before the doll on the evidence table at the precinct, something about it gave him pause. It wasn't just the eye. Forensics confirmed the fluid was human blood AB negative, a rare type. It was stored within a small capsule behind the eye and released through a minute pressure valve, as if someone wanted the doll to cry blood on command. The doll's head and torso were made from an unusual polymer blend that had degraded with time, but the hands were crafted from a different material altogether. Under blacklight, fine ridges appeared across the surface human fingerprints. Someone had cast real human skin. Reeves closed the folder and picked up the phone. "Get me a team to the condemned house at 47 Lily Street," he said. "I want it locked down by nightfall." Number 47 Lily Street had been abandoned since 2016 after a fire gutted part of the upper floor. The owner of record was one Mrs. Catherine Blythe, a name that didn't match any real person in the UK registry. The house had remained in limbo, its windows boarded up, weeds clawing their way through the pavement cracks. The front door groaned open under Reeves's push. A stench hit him immediately, faintly metallic, with the sourness of old rot and wet plaster. Inside, the house was a hoarder's crypt. Boxes of doll parts, arms, heads, torsos littered the floor. Some were antique, others were crudely handmade. The walls were covered in pages from old catalogs, newspaper clippings, and dozens of hand-drawn sketches of wide-eyed girls in frilly dresses. But the worst was the living room. There, positioned upright on a torn Victorian settee, were 3 life-size dolls. Each one had a porcelain face, curly blonde hair, and dresses made from faded fabric that might once have been curtains or bed sheets. Their eyes were different from each other, one glass, one button, one mechanical. The air was still, but something about their postures seemed human. "Jesus Christ," muttered one of the officers. Behind the dolls, a painting hung on the wall, a little girl in a red pinafore, standing in front of the very same house they were in. Her face was scratched out with a blade. The forensics team moved in quickly. They swept the place top to bottom. It wasn't until they reached the back of the house that one of the techs called out. There is a trapdoor under the pantry floorboards. Reeves pushed forward. The wooden slats had been poorly concealed. When lifted, they revealed a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air that rose from the void was colder, damp, and acrid. Flashlights illuminated a curved stone chamber beneath the house. Along the walls were shelves, and on the shelves, more dolls. Hundreds of them, some with faces, some without, some with wigs made from human hair. One in the center had a name stitched across its chest, Emily. Reeves froze. Emily Harker. The girl who went missing 9 months ago after leaving for a job interview at a bespoke toy shop that no longer existed. Her parents had plastered her face all over the city. No suspects, no evidence, no body until now. And then came the worst discovery yet. At the far end of the basement was a workbench. Upon it, a series of carefully labeled jars, each containing preserved human tissue. Muscle, skin, bone fragments. A doll in progress sat in a small wooden chair, its eye sockets empty, but the mouth partially stitched shut with surgical wire. Pinned to the wall behind it was a checklist. Left eye, harvested. Mouth, shaped. Skin, third application. Hair, acquired blonde, root ready. Smile, not wide enough. Next to the checklist was a single Polaroid. It showed a bound girl, still alive, strapped to a table, her eyes wide with terror. Her hair unmistakably blonde. Emily Harker. As officers secured the scene and called in backup, Reeves walked back up the stairs, emerging into the dusk. Lily Street had never felt more silent. He looked once more at the doll in the evidence bag, the one found by the fence. It blinked again in the last rays of sunlight. And this time, Reeves was sure of it, the movement was not mechanical. It was intentional. The condemned house groaned as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, throwing Lily Street into a shadowed stillness. Floodlights now bathed the old structure, casting jagged silhouettes of broken beams and shattered windows onto the pavement. But inside, in the basement laboratory that officers had just uncovered, the air seemed to press inward, thick with history and horror. Detective Inspector Callum Reeves stood at the edge of the workshop table, his eyes fixed on the doll labeled Emily. Forensic photographer Miriam Knox moved silently beside him, documenting every inch of the room. But something about the positioning of the tools, scalpels, paintbrushes, tiny leather-working instruments made Reeves pause. "This isn't just a psychopath playing dress-up," he muttered. "This is ritual." Knox turned to him. "Sir?" Reeves pointed to the small metal etching tool resting on the bench. "Look at the marks on the doll's torso's left ribs, just under the neckline. It's the same symbol." Knox stepped closer, adjusted her flashlight, and squinted. There it was, carved into the polymer skin of at least 4 dolls, a circular motif with 3 vertical slashes, intersected by an upside-down triangle. It looked ancient, yet deliberate. They scanned the other dolls on the shelves, more of the same. The symbol wasn't decorative, it was branded into the chest of each one like a grotesque stamp of ownership. By midnight, a local folklore consultant had been called and Dr. Lena Ashcroft, a scholar from King's College who specialized in occult symbology. As she descended into the basement, her face blanched. "I've seen this before," she whispered, tracing her gloved fingers across the carving on one of the dolls. "This is a sigil associated with the myth of El Solitario, a Spanish folk tale about a shadow puppeteer who believed he could trap souls inside marionettes." Reeves raised an eyebrow. "Folktale? This is London, not Seville." Dr. Ashcroft nodded, eyes still on the doll. "True, but these symbols weren't isolated to Spain. There were whispered reports in the 19th century European puppet makers who believed that replicating human suffering in artificial vessels would give their creations life." Reeves's blood chilled. "You're saying these dolls were made to hold souls?" "Not just hold them," she said, "but preserve them." Further searches of the house revealed something stranger still. Behind a loose section of drywall in the upstairs hallway, officers discovered a hidden closet. Inside, a rusted trunk. Within the trunk, old VHS tapes, dozens of them, all labeled with dates, all spanning nearly 15 years. They hauled them to the station for examination. The first tape Reeves watched was dated March 5, 2009. The footage began shakily, a handheld camera moving through the very same basement they'd just raided. A voice high-pitched, almost sing-song narrated in a lilting whisper. Little Clara was very quiet today. She didn't scream after the 3rd stitch. The camera panned to a girl, bound to a steel gurney, her mouth already partially sewn shut, Her eyes darted to the lens. Muffled sobs. Reeves stopped the tape. He didn't need to see more. The voice matched nothing in their suspect database. Too strange, too deliberate. Almost performative. Back in the present-day basement, forensic teams had begun cataloging everything. But it wasn't the body parts or the dolls that disturbed them most. It was what they found beneath the concrete floor. Using ground-penetrating radar, specialists detected irregularities beneath the central slab. Within hours, excavation began. What they unearthed sent a wave of revulsion through the entire department. A crypt shallow and amateurishly built, but effective. Inside were 6 small coffins, each one sealed tight. Each one marked not with names, but with doll-sized dresses stitched directly onto the lids. The first coffin opened contained the decomposed remains of a young girl, still wearing a fabric mask shaped like a rabbit's face. The second held nothing but a torso and strands of hair identical to the wigs used on the dolls upstairs. The third contained 2 skulls, one large, one small. No one spoke for a long time after that. That night, as Reeves pored over files at his desk, he received a call. It was Sergeant Lana Wilkes, posted at the scene. "Sir, you need to see this. Another doll. It wasn't here before." Reeves frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's on the staircase just above the basement door. Same size, same eyes. But this one's holding something." 15 minutes later, Reeves was back at Lily Street. The doll was there, just as Wilkes described, seated neatly on the 3rd step. Its porcelain face cracked, and in its tiny stitched hands was a folded note. He took it carefully, gloves on, and unfolded it. The paper was yellowed, but the ink was fresh. It read, "You're getting too close. I don't like visitors, but I love new dolls." There was no signature, but on the back of the note was a thumbprint. It matched no one in the system. And worse, it was made with blood. Outside the house on Lily Street, a rainstorm rolled in like a grim curtain. The cobbled sidewalk shimmered under street lamps, distorted by streaks of water and the flashing blues of police cruisers. But inside the station, Detective Callum Reeves wasn't paying attention to the weather. He was focused on a file one that had gathered dust for over a decade. It had taken hours of digging through property records and archival directories, but he had finally unearthed the name of the legal owner of 42 Lily Street, Richard Havelock. Registered in 1995. No tax records since 2013. No bank activity. No driver's license renewal. The man had, for all intents and purposes, disappeared. But his name triggered something familiar in Reeves' mind. He'd heard it before. He dug further. In a 2009 article from the London Evening Ledger, Richard Havelock had been profiled as a reclusive artisan who specialized in handcrafted Victorian-style dolls and mannequins. He had exhibited just once, at an underground collectors' convention in Prague. The article described his work as disturbingly lifelike, with an uncanny ability to mirror human anguish. The journalist ended the piece with a quote from Havelock. "A doll is only perfect when it knows it's been broken." Reeves stared at the sentence for a long time. Back at Lily Street, another revelation was unfolding. Forensic analyst Miriam Knox, now working with an anthropologist from the British Museum, had begun identifying the age and condition of the remains found beneath the house. Several bones bore markings small, intricate carvings in bone that seemed more decorative than ritualistic. But one of the coffins stood out. It contained a femur with distinct serrations. Dr. Lena Ashcroft was summoned once again. "These are tool marks," she confirmed, examining the femur under magnification. "Deliberate," repeated, almost artistic. "You mean he was carving into them?" Reeves asked. She nodded slowly. This wasn't just torture. This was craftsmanship. That same evening, Reeves received a call from the Prague Metropolitan Police. They had records on Havelock. Apparently, in 2010, he had been detained briefly in Prague following reports of screaming heard from his rented flat. Police had discovered mannequins hanging from meat hooks in his living room, but no human remains. He was questioned. then released for lack of evidence. But one detail stood out. His apartment walls were covered in photographs, black and white portraits of women, all with the same dead eyes and half smiles. "Do you still have the photos?" Reeves asked. The check officer hesitated, then sent over a scanned image. Reeves opened the file. One of the women in the photograph, faded, grainy, slumped in a wicker chair, had the same face as doll number 4 found in the Lily Street basement. The resemblance wasn't just strong. It was identical. Meanwhile, a new detail emerged. The dolls themselves weren't entirely synthetic. Under X-ray, tiny bone fragments were embedded inside the torsos, almost like a skeletal framework. Reeves ordered one to be dissected. Inside, they discovered a child's vertebra fused into the spine of the doll. Sewn into the fabric of the dress was a small strip of skin, tanned and lacquered with faded tattoos. These weren't just keepsakes. Each doll was its victim. More questions than answers. Where had Havelock gone? Had he continued his work elsewhere? Or had someone else taken over his art? Late that night, Reeves sat at his desk, rubbing his temples. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from a missing persons database. Match found. A girl reported missing in Sheffield in 2007, named Clara Densley. Age 14. DNA from a tooth recovered in coffin number 3 matched hers. That wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the case notes. Clara had vanished after going to a job interview for a doll factory internship. The flyer she responded to listed a mailing address, an abandoned warehouse on the Thames, now demolished. The factory's name, Mason Havelock. Reeves printed the flyer from the archives and pinned it to the investigation board. Below the elegant font, a tagline read, "Crafting dolls worth remembering." It was printed in blood red ink. And underneath the address, barely visible without UV light, were the same carved symbols from the doll's chest, 3 slashes through a circle intersected by a triangle. Reeves whispered, almost involuntarily, "He's not done." The wax cathedral loomed like a forgotten temple in the heart of East London. Once a grand theater, it had been abandoned after a fire gutted its eastern wing in 1992. Locals whispered stories about the place's strange lights, whispers in the dark, shadows moving behind the broken stained glass windows. But now, for the first time in over a decade, its rusted doors were being forced open. Detective Reeves stepped inside with his team, the creak of the hinges echoing into the hollow auditorium. Their flashlights cut through the stale air, catching motes of dust that danced like ash. The place smelled of melted plastic, soot, and something else, something metallic and old, like dried blood and lacquered skin. At the center of the main hall stood a massive stage, its velvet curtains still intact but stained with dark patches. Behind it, a wide set of double doors led to the backstage area. Graffiti marked the walls, but amidst the vandalism, one recurring symbol stood out, the same circle with 3 slashes and a triangle, now sprayed in crimson paint. They were in the right place. As they pushed deeper into the backstage corridors, the walls began to change. The red spray paint gave way to delicately hand-painted murals, macabre, detailed and eerily elegant. Women with porcelain skin and hollow eyes were depicted dancing in flowing Victorian dresses, some missing limbs, others sewn together with visible stitches. It wasn't vandalism. It was art. Havelock's art. The team stumbled into what looked like a private exhibition room. Dozens of mannequins stood on pedestals under shattered skylights. But these weren't ordinary mannequins. They were dressed in antique clothing, hair woven with human strands. Their eyes were placed with glass marbles. Some had real fingernails. Others had lips made of cured flesh. Each had a nameplate. Doll number 5, Eleanor the Listener. Doll number 6, Maisie who danced too long. And then one that made Reeves' blood run cold. Doll number 7, Clara Densley. Behind the nameplate was a small compartment. Forensics opened it carefully. Inside, a dried-out tongue, curled like a dead leaf, and a cassette tape. Back at the station, they played it. "You said I'd be famous." You said you'd make me into something beautiful. Please, please. I want to go home. Then silence. Then humming. A low, melodic lullaby in a man's voice. Reeves shut the tape off. Elsewhere in the building, a different kind of horror awaited. In the basement, the team discovered a long corridor of wax figures. Dozens of them, each posed mid-scream or in the act of struggle. All of them coated in layers of yellowish wax, but not quite enough to hide what lay beneath. Forensic scans confirmed it. Underneath each wax shell were human remains. One had a visible eye socket, poorly concealed. Another's mouth was agape, lips frozen mid-cry, teeth still visible beneath the wax. In the far corner, they found a figure suspended by wires, ballerina style, its arms outstretched like a crucifix. The wax had cracked near the ribs, revealing etched writing beneath the surface. Perfection requires sacrifice. Dr. Ashcroft, pale and shaken, could barely speak. These aren't statues. They're tombs. The discovery of the wax cathedral triggered media chaos. News vans swarmed the site. Photos leaked. Parliament demanded explanations, but Reeves had one focus: find Havelock. Interpol confirmed no activity under his name, no bank cards, no border crossings, nothing. It was as if the man had died or gone underground. But then a breakthrough. A nurse at a psychiatric hospital in Marseille called. She had recognized Havelock's face from a leaked image. Said he visited once, 10 years ago, asking to speak to a patient, an elderly woman named Celeste Moreau. She was a retired dollmaker and his mother. Reeves booked the next flight. Before leaving, he made one last stop back at the Lily Street house. There, in the ruined basement, something new had appeared. A doll, clean, untouched, not there during the original raid. Its dress was stitched from police evidence tape. Pinned to its chest, a note, handwritten. You've finally begun to see the art, but can you see the artist? R.H. Reeves stared into the doll's glass eyes and knew, without a doubt, the hunt had only just begun. The train ride to Marseille cut across southern France under a dull gray sky. Detective Reeves sat alone, reviewing the file on Celeste Moreau, the woman believed to be Havelock's mother. Her records painted a complicated portrait, once a renowned artisan known for her lifelike porcelain dolls, later committed after a series of mental health episodes and a suspected arson incident involving her own workshop. No children listed in official documents, no next of kin. But the nurse had been certain. Reeves arrived at St. Benut Psychiatric Hospital just before sunset. The facility was an old stone convent repurposed into a mental institution, isolated on a hillside above the sea. Inside, it was quiet, eerily so, no televisions. No music, just the faint sound of wind chimes in the inner courtyard. He was led to Celeste's room, where an elderly woman sat by the window, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Her hair was bone white, pinned in a bun. Her eyes were alert but distant. Her walls were covered in sketches faces, dolls, and grotesque half-human hybrids. Some wore theatrical masks. One bore an unmistakable resemblance to Clara Densley. Celeste Moreau, Reeves said gently. She didn't turn. I'm here about your son. That got her attention. Her head turned slowly, like a wind-up mechanism loosening. I have no son, she whispered. But as the conversation unfolded, her denial began to fracture. She spoke of the boy I never wanted but couldn't give away. Said he arrived one winter night at her doorstep, a bastard child from a mistake during the London exhibit. She never named the father. Instead, she described how the boy never cried, only stared, how he played with scalpels instead of toys, how, by age 6, he began to dissect her dolls and rearrange their parts. I locked him in the cellar for weeks, she said. He said it was peaceful, said it helped him think. Reeves asked for his name. Celeste smiled. He named himself, said the world had given him no face, so he would carve one. Roderick Havelock. Then she grew quiet. But he was always ... empty. like he was made of air and porcelain. One day he left, and I prayed he would break. Back in London, news broke that another doll had been found, this time in Amsterdam, left outside a theater with a note, "Art doesn't sleep." The victim was a 22-year-old performance artist. Same signs, pieces removed, preserved, reconstructed into a wax-lacquered effigy. Reeves began to suspect something more unsettling: a pattern of performance locations. All the dolls had been placed in or near old theaters, opera houses, or studios. Places of expression. Places of transformation. He spread a map out over the conference room wall and began marking the sites: Lily Street basement, the Wax Cathedral, Theatre de la Lune, Marseille, abandoned, De Vries Ballet School, Amsterdam. Each location formed a shape, not a circle, not a spiral, a sigil. And at its center lay Vienna. Interpol confirmed a private shipping container had recently arrived at the Vienna port, registered to a shell company known as White Thread Holdings, a name found in one of Celeste's dollmaker invoices from the 1970s. Reeves moved fast. He landed in Vienna 2 days later and met with local authorities. The container had already been delivered to a warehouse in the industrial district, sealed, unmarked, heavily reinforced. They breached it on site. Inside, a mobile studio. Surgical tables, jars filled with preservatives, a velvet chair facing a row of mannequins, and in the center, a half-completed wax doll the size of a full-grown man, real human hair. One eye in place, the other socket empty. Its chest cavity still open, wires hanging like nerves. Next to it, on a pedestal, sat a music box. Reeves opened it. A melody began to play, a warped, slowed-down version of Eau Claire de la Lune. He turned back toward the team, ready to speak when the lights went out. Panic, darkness, then a scream. By flashlight, Reeves found Officer Malek collapsed near the exit. Throat slit, blood pooling beneath. Someone had been in there with them and escaped. On the table, scrawled into the wax of the unfinished doll, was a single phrase: "The maestro needs his finale." That night, Reeves sat alone in the Vienna precinct, staring at the wall of evidence. Photos, mannequins, notes, all of it pointing not only to one man, but to a legacy. A new idea began to form, a horrifying possibility. What if Havelock wasn't working alone? What if the killings were a tradition? He remembered something Celeste had muttered before he left. He wasn't the first to wear the face. Reeves leaned forward. If Roderick Havelock was just a chapter, then who wrote the book? The waxman's art was far from over. Reeves spent the next 48 hours in Vienna, sleepless and caffeinated, poring over old theater archives, hospital records, auction house inventories, anything connected to White Thread Holdings or the Waxman. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A curator at the Vienna Museum of Obscure Arts responded to a query about a similar porcelain mask style. She claimed one of their older exhibits, long since shuttered, included a 19th century death mask, almost identical in style to the face Havelock was known to wear. The mask had once belonged to a French nobleman turned stage illusionist, Lucien Delacroix, who vanished after a series of disappearances in Marseille during the 1880s. Local legend blamed him for using real people. In his macabre illusions, bodies never recovered. His stage name? Le Mater de Sire, the Wax Master. The deeper Reeves dug, the more he unearthed. Across a timeline of nearly 140 years, he found a series of murders spaced out by decades, in cities famous for their art scenes: Paris, Vienna, Prague, Berlin. Each tied to different names, different artists, but the methods, the obsession with form, with preservation, with turning corpses into public displays, were eerily consistent. Each perpetrator wore a mask. Each referred to their work as the exhibit. This was no single killer. It was a cult of artists, a legacy of blood and beauty passed from one generation to the next, a French cabal called La Chambre Blanche, the White Room. Reeves returned to London immediately. Claire Densley's murder now appeared to be part of a long chain of initiation rituals, a performance designed not just to shock, but but to prove worth to this secret society. He reached out to Scotland Yard's cold case division, pulling files from as far back as the 1950s. One in particular stood out. A 1954 case in which a ballerina was found dismembered and lacquered, her body displayed in an abandoned theater. The name of the detective back then, Reginald Fairburn Reeves's retired mentor. Reeves visited him that same night. Fairburn, now blind and 92, lived in a nursing home just outside London. His memory was faded, but when Reeves mentioned White Room, the old man straightened in his chair. "They were real," he croaked. "I saw them once, in Prague, all in white suits. No voices, only gestures. The girl, they made her dance, even after she died." He shivered. "They're not people, Liam. They're curators. They think death is the medium, and the body is their canvas." At that moment, back in Vienna, another body was found. This time, it wasn't in a hidden basement or sealed warehouse. It was in the open center stage at the Vienna State Opera, beneath the crystal chandelier. The audience had just taken their seats for a performance of Faust. The curtain rose to reveal a crucified dancer, her limbs unnaturally contorted, her skin coated in wax and silver leaf. On the backdrop, written in thick tar-like paint, La Chambre Blanche welcomes its newest voice. Interpol was in chaos, but for Reeves, it was confirmation. Havelock had succeeded. He had completed his finale and earned entrance into the White Room, and now they were sending a message. Reeves flew to Prague, chasing a lead tied to the historic Dvorek Theater, where records showed a private gala was being organized by an anonymous patron known only as Curator V. This gala was off the books, unpublicized, invite only, no tickets. No press, only a black velvet card embossed with a wax seal. It took bribing an archivist and faking an identity, but Reeves managed to intercept one of the invitations. The address wasn't the theater. It was an underground location just outside the city, an abandoned Cold War-era bunker. Reeves went in alone. Inside, the air was thick with chemical preservative and incense. The main hall had been transformed into a gallery, each room one exhibit. A man sculpted into a piano, his bones hollowed to mimic strings. A woman encased in clear resin, posed mid-ballet leap. A child's body suspended in fluid, dissected with museum labels pointing to every nerve. At the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a new mask. Different from the others, bone-white, faceless, with no eye holes. As Reeves approached, voices whispered in the dark. "Art requires sacrifice." 10 footsteps. And from the shadows, Havelock emerged. Gone was the theatrical flair. He wore a simple white coat, stained at the cuffs. "I'm not here to run," he said. "I'm here to show you." He motioned behind Reeves. There, slowly walking toward them, were 5 masked figures, each in ceremonial white. No eye holes, no mouths, just silent witnesses. "This is what you've been chasing," Havelock whispered. "You thought I was the killer." He lifted the faceless mask. "But I was only ever the student." The room held its breath. The 5 masked figures stood in silence, arranged like statues around Reeves and Havelock. Every movement echoed boots on concrete, the faint creak of leather gloves. The walls of the underground bunker were lined with red velvet drapes, but Reeves could still smell the mildew underneath. And the decay. Havelock held the faceless mask as if it were sacred. "This is your invitation," he said, voice hushed. "You've seen what we do. You understand it now. You've come this far. Because a part of you agrees." Reeves stared at him, disgust creeping behind his restraint. "You mutilate people and call it art. We elevate them," Havelock interrupted, eyes wide. "We preserve their essence. Their final moment becomes immortal. What is more eternal than beauty made of death?" Reeves could feel the bile rising, but he also understood. He wasn't getting out of here by appealing to reason. He had to play along. "If I put on the mask," he asked slowly, "do I become one of you?" One of the silent masked figures turned its head, just slightly, watching. Havelock smiled. No, you begin your exhibition. They led him deeper, through a corridor of flickering lanterns, into a chamber filled with half-finished installations. Some of the bodies were still warm. Others waxed, embalmed, posed were in stages of preparation. The level of detail was staggering. Anatomical precision met disturbing imagination. One corpse had been turned into a carousel of limbs, spinning slowly to music box chimes. Another was formed into a stained glass cathedral, its bones stained and fitted into lead frames. These are from the new inductees, Havelock explained, reverent. Every artist leaves a gift for La Chambre Blanche. A tribute. Reeves spotted something in the far corner, a photo pinned to a wall. It was Clara Densley. Underneath it, a handwritten note. Her silence was sublime. Suddenly, the silence was broken. A siren blared, distant at first, then louder. One of the masked figures hurried into the room, whispering into Havelock's ear. The smile fell from his face. They found us. Reeves kept his expression flat, though his heart pounded. Interpol, the tracker he planted in Havelock's suitcase, had worked. Havelock spun to Reeves. You betrayed the threshold, he hissed. From his coat, he pulled a bone-handled scalpel, ivory glinting under the dim light, but Reeves was already moving. He shoved over one of the half-finished exhibits, a table of glass limbs that shattered in a cascade of shards. Chaos erupted. The masked figures lunged, but Reeves had trained for worse. He snatched a metal rod from the ground, swinging it with calculated brutality. One figure went down. Another staggered, mask cracking. As he fought, the overhead lights began to flicker violently. Shadows danced across the walls, making the grotesques come alive. Then gunfire. Interpol agents burst through the bunker's entrance, shouting in multiple languages. Reeves ducked behind a column, waving them forward. They're armed with scalpels and delusions, he yelled, but they're dangerous. Take them alive if you can. The raid lasted 12 minutes. By the end, 3 members of La Chambre Blanche were dead. 2 were captured alive, masks forcibly removed. Reeves stood over one of them, an old woman, silent and serene. Her real face was painted white, her eyes completely black from permanent ink injections. She stared at him. He escaped, she whispered. Havelock was gone. Interpol closed the bunker, cordoned off everything. The grotesque sculptures were taken to a secure morgue under classified case numbers. Media was told it was a chemical lab explosion. Reeves didn't argue. The world wasn't ready to know the truth. Back in London, he reviewed the footage. The captured cultists said little. One of them, an ex-surgeon from Switzerland, admitted that La Chambre Blanche operated in 5 cities per decade, moving like a traveling exhibition, with each generation selecting its successors. They communicated through symbolism, not speech. To speak, he said, is to corrupt the art. They believed death was cleansing, that the human form was most pure at the moment of expiration. Every exhibit was chosen, created, and preserved as a sacred gesture. Reeves wrote the report, then burned a copy. Some truths, he decided, needed to stay in shadow. 2 weeks later, he received a package, no return address. Inside, a wax-sealed envelope and a single object. The faceless mask, no eye holes, no mouth, just a blank, white surface. Underneath it, a note. Your exhibit is not yet complete. When you are ready, we will find you. 5. The final canvas. A month passed. Then 2. Detective Inspector Ellis Reeves didn't speak of La Chambre Blanche again. He returned to his daily routines, reports, surveillance meetings, and the rare sting operation, but his colleagues knew something had changed. His eyes lingered longer on photos. His fingers hovered over victim reports as if tracing a design only he could see. And late at night, he'd find himself staring at the mask. He kept it hidden in the back of his closet, sealed in a black velvet box, but it haunted him. The smooth, featureless surface was both a warning and a promise, an open door back into the abyss. On a cold November morning, an envelope slid beneath his door. No stamps, no postmark. Just his name, handwritten. Inside was a single photograph. A new victim posed inside a derelict opera house in Budapest. Draped in lace, her mouth sewn shut, her eyes replaced with pearl buttons. Beneath her, a plaque read, Silence 3, curated by V. Clipped to the photo was a note. She sang once, before she saw the room. Now she's eternal. The gallery moves. Follow it. There were GPS coordinates scrawled in ink. Reeves flew to Hungary under the guise of a cultural trafficking investigation. He brought only 2 things, his service pistol and the mask. The opera house had been closed since 1989. Crumbling ceilings, rotten stage curtains, and a cavernous silence filled the building. The stench of mildew barely masked the sweeter, more metallic tang that told Reeves he was close. He moved carefully, quietly, until he reached the stage. There, under a single flickering spotlight, was the latest exhibit. She was suspended like a marionette, strings of violin bow hair stretching her limbs into grotesque grace. Her spine was arched unnaturally, mouth frozen mid-scream. Her throat had been carefully embroidered with gold thread. Reeves didn't need to read the plaque. He knew the signature. Then came the sound of footsteps. He turned. Havelock stood in one of the theater boxes above, shrouded in shadow. Behind him, new figures in white, 5 of them, all masked, all silent. "You came alone," Havelock called down. "Brave or foolish?" Reeves stepped onto the stage slowly, his hand on his gun. "You left a trail this time. You wanted me to find you." "Of course," Havelock said. "This is the final act. We needed you for it." He descended the stairs like a conductor walking to his orchestra. "This is your gallery, Inspector. All of it. You've seen every piece, felt them, followed them. You've even brought the final frame." He gestured toward Reeves's coat. "The mask. Put it on, Reeves. Complete the series, close the cycle." Reeves drew his pistol. "Not this time." Havelock didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled and clapped once. The 5 masked figures behind him stepped forward, each carrying something wrapped in black cloth. One by one, they unveiled sculptures of Reeves himself, 5 distorted versions of him. One with no eyes, one with hands replaced by cameras, one skin to muscle, one drowning in plaster, one burnt and charred, mouth open in horror. "We've studied you," Havelock whispered. "Every obsession, every regret. This is your mirror." Reeves' mind reeled. These weren't just grotesque, they were personal. The scar on one sculpture's cheek matched one Reeves got in Belfast, 2013. Another wore his father's wedding ring. They'd been watching him for years. "You were always part of this," Havelock said softly. "You just didn't know it." Suddenly, smoke erupted from behind the stage, a diversion. Interpol agents burst through the orchestra pit, shouting commands. Gunfire erupted. Reeves dropped behind the proscenium as bullets shattered chandeliers and ripped through velvet curtains. Screams echoed through the theater, but Havelock was gone again. In the confusion, the masked figures vanished, leaving behind only the exhibits and one final note nailed to the back wall. "You may kill the painter, but the canvas remains." Back in London, Reeves stared at the 5 statues of himself. They had been recovered, catalogued, hidden from the public eye. But one had gone missing. The one with no face. Then, 3 days later, the National Gallery of Modern Art in Rome received an anonymous submission. No artist's name. No contact info. Just a title. The Investigator's Silence V. It was a sculpture of Reeves, perfectly tailed, eyes closed, mouth stitched, heart carved out, beneath the gallery. 3 weeks after the Rome exhibit, Inspector Reeves was officially placed on administrative leave. His superiors cited psychological strain and unauthorized field activity, but they never questioned the photos. They didn't ask about the sculptures. No one wanted to touch the cursed thread he had pulled loose, but Reeves wasn't done. He wasn't chasing a killer anymore. He was chasing a belief system. The break came unexpectedly from the past. An old file from the 1980s surfaced, sent anonymously to Reeves's personal email. It referenced a secret artistic society once active in southern France, near Carcassonne. They called themselves Les Animutes, the Silent Angels. They believed that suffering was the truest form of human expression and that pain could be sculpted into transcendence. Their motto, to feel is to immortalize. Reeves dove in. The symbols matched. So did the language, the floor titles, the obsession with silence and anatomy. And deep in the recovered manifesto, he found a familiar name. Vincent Havelock, born 1969, disappeared 1994, presumed dead. But Havelock hadn't died. He'd simply gone underground. And he'd taken Les Animutes with him. The trail led Reeves to a crumbling abbey on the outskirts of Limoux. Overgrown with moss, its Gothic arches stretched toward a sky that never quite brightened. Local legends claimed it was haunted. Children went missing there in the 50s. Adults heard weeping from the crypt. Reeves entered at midnight. The sanctuary was empty until he pulled a candelabra on the altar. The floor creaked, then sank, revealing stairs. Beneath the abbey was a forgotten catacomb, carved into the bedrock. Symbols of silence and agony lined the walls. Reeves's flashlight flickered as he descended deeper, past chambers lined with masks, hundreds of them, all different, some cracked, all watching. Then, at the end of the corridor, he found the studio. Lit by candles, the walls were covered in sketches, twisted poses, surgical notes, and photographs of every known victim from La Chambre Blanche. In the center stood a massive sculpture in progress, a mosaic of suffering, 30 victims fused together into a single form. And beside it, Havelock, alive. Older, thinner, but eyes as sharp as razors. I wondered how long it would take, he said, not surprised. You've come far, Inspector. But this isn't your gallery. Not yet. Reeves raised his gun. It ends tonight. Havelock didn't move. He simply gestured toward a slab in the corner. Upon it, Reeves's father's photo, medical files, letters, DNA charts. You think you were chasing me, Havelock whispered. But you were made for this. You are our greatest work. Reeves's hands trembled. The DNA, it matched. His father had been an early member of Les Animutes. He had helped build this ideology. Reeves was born into it, bred to investigate, to chase suffering, to be obsessed with the aesthetic of pain. You were never outside the canvas, Havelock murmured. You were the brush. Reeves fired. Once, twice. Havelock fell, blood spreading across the stone floor like spilled ink, but he smiled as he died. The gallery moves. With or without me. Reeves burned the studio. He sealed the catacombs. He made no report. But 2 months later, an exhibit appeared in Tokyo. No known artist. Title, Ashes of the Angel. Inside, a sculpture of Havelock, eyes stitched, mouth open in laughter. And a new name appeared in the artist's registry. V. Reeves. The mask will fit. 6 months passed. Vincent Reeves was no longer an inspector, no longer a man of duty or doubt. He had vanished from the public eye, resigned, removed, reborn. The ashes of the La Chambre Blanche case were scattered across continents, buried under burned evidence and bureaucratic silence. But the art continued. A string of underground exhibits began appearing. Shanghai, Snow Hollow, Amsterdam. Each one more elaborate than the last body sculptures, macabre installations, accompanied by poetic riddles and surgical diagrams. No known curator. But always in the artist credits, RV. Speculation swirled in the art world. Some whispered that it was an anonymous collective. Others that Reeves had gone mad and turned to art. But a few, those who had stood in blood-soaked galleries and seen the masks, knew better. In Prague, a journalist named Lydia Haffel was found dead. Tortured, drained of blood. Her face sculpted into an expression of ecstasy, then encased in clear resin. It sat atop a pedestal in the underground museum called The Final Silence. On the wall, written in ash, she asked too many questions. So we gave her the answer. Interpol reactivated the file. But Reeves had already vanished again. Back in France, the abbey in Limoux was sealed, declared condemned. But a week later, a priest was arrested after being caught carving a mask into the confession booth. He claimed a voice in his dreams told him to prepare the new chapel. When questioned about who the voice belonged to, he only replied, "The masked angel. He wears the truth." The twist, what no one saw coming, emerged from a private letter mailed anonymously to a retired detective in Marseille. Inside, a photo of Vincent Reeves in New York, standing in front of a gallery titled Echoes of Grief. He was smiling. Not a forced smile, a serene one. In the background, a young girl no more than 10, wearing a white ceramic mask and holding his hand. On the back of the photo, her name is Margot. She sculpted the heart by herself. She's learning. She sees. The implications were horrific. Reeves wasn't just a victim, or a detective, or even a convert. He was the bridge, the transition from the old generation of Les Ennuots to the new one. And now he was teaching others. The cult hadn't died. It had evolved. Last known sighting, Iceland, near a glacier cave where locals reported seeing strange red lights flickering beneath the ice. Authorities found nothing but footprints child-sized, leading into the dark, and on the cave wall, painted in frost. The world forgets pain. We do not. The mask will fit you too.